Hello, 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 and thank you so much for stopping by. I'm Soraya Marshall Wright. Welcome to The World According to Soraya. This is actually a pretty special treat. Welcome to my backyard oasis. I'm so happy to have you here. Okay, so can you believe it's almost the end of August? I can't believe it's almost the end of August, but we are approaching a pretty important deadline in Medicare land. So today we are going to talk about Medicare, specifically Medicare Parts A and B. Now, if you're nearing age 65 or are just becoming eligible for Medicare, chances are you've probably been bombarded with a whole bunch of information from lots of different sources, the AARPs and Humanas of the world, trying to give you information and get your business. Now, most of the information that you likely received, unless it came from CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, it was talking about supplemental insurance, not what I like to refer to as the core of the program, Medicare Parts A and B. So today we're going to talk about that a little bit. Now, what is Medicare? When are you eligible and when can you enroll? Okay, so Medicare, and I'll give this to you the way that I used to give it to my clients in my prior life. Two parts that I consider as the core of the program. Medicare Part A will cover you if you're hospitalized, and Part B works similar to regular health insurance. It will cover your regular doctor visits and so on, but not things like vision and dental. You do have your supplemental insurance, the C, D, and lots of people like to say it's all sorts of letters of the alphabet, but the supplemental insurance will cover what would typically be your out-of-pocket expenses. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail about that, but we will talk about the basic requirements for Medicare A and B. All right, so how do you qualify? To be eligible for Medicare, you have to be age 65 or older, or someone who is entitled to disability benefits. You have to be eligible for 2 years before becoming eligible for Medicare under disability. And if you are someone who has renal disease and need dialysis, you could be eligible for Medicare earlier than that. Now, some people confuse Medicare Part A and the part where I said that it covers you if you're hospitalized. Some people think that that means you will be covered if you need long-term care. Not the case at all. We're not going to go into too much detail about that, but you should know that Medicare Part A is not what you use for long-term care. Now, at age 65, you do have what's called an initial enrollment period to sign up for Medicare. The initial enrollment period starts about 3 months before your 65th birthday and ends 3 months after. What that means is during that initial enrollment period, you could sign up whether you had prior insurance or not. You would not have a penalty. But if you do not sign up prior to your 65th birthday, there may be a delay in getting coverage started. But there's no additional documentation, no additional proof that you have to show. You are simply eligible and you are in your initial enrollment period. Then there's what Medicare calls the general enrollment period. Under the general enrollment period, that happens every year, January through March. Anyone who's Medicare eligible and did not enroll during their initial enrollment period could sign up at that point. However, there are some very, 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 very important restrictions that you should be aware of. Number one, for the general enrollment period, you could only sign up for Medicare January, February, March of each year. Regardless of when you sign up, coverage would not be effective until July. If you did not have other coverage to qualify for a different enrollment, and we'll talk about that different enrollment in just a little bit, you may also be subject to a penalty. The penalty is 10% for each 12-month period without active work coverage. What in the world does that mean? Okay, I'll explain. If you are working and you're over the age of 65, you have insurance, you're paying Medicare taxes, that means you have valid coverage as far as Medicare is concerned. So if you do not enroll during your initial enrollment period, you will be allowed what's called a special enrollment period, where you would be allowed to enroll once your work coverage ends. At that point, there would be no penalties assessed. That would be a special enrollment period. It would only be available to you if you are working or have a spouse who's working, or your coverage, wherever it comes from a person who is working and paying Medicare taxes. That is valid coverage for Medicare purposes. If, however, you have coverage from a place where you retired, even if they are covering all of your needs, that would not qualify for the special enrollment period. You've got to be working it. It's got to be coverage through active work. You or your spouse, whoever the insurance carrier or the policy holder rather is, has to be a working person. Okay. So what's going on, and why did I say we're approaching a pretty important deadline? There are some individuals who thought that they could sign up for the Affordable Care Act and did not have to pick up Medicare. And these people might have been enrolled in the Affordable Care Act prior to turning 65 or becoming eligible, or they may have signed up after the fact. Whatever the circumstances may be, if you were eligible for Medicare after 2013 and you were enrolled under the Affordable Care Act, which means you did not have valid coverage, right? Because as we just discussed, that is not active work coverage from a source that is paying Medicare taxes. Normally, that would mean you would not qualify for special enrollment. Well, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they are providing an extended equitable relief, allowing individuals who were eligible for Medicare but covered under the Affordable Care Act and failed to enroll timely, basically an opportunity to present their evidence and be able to sign up without having a penalty. Now, this is not just restricted to individuals who fail to sign up. So if you signed up under the general enrollment, for instance, in 2015 or 16, and you have a penalty like I mentioned, you could still submit a request to be considered for this. Okay, now this is a request that has to be made through your local Social Security office. This is not a typical process, so if you get mixed information, that's likely why. But if you inquire a little bit more, someone should be able to give you the information that you need if you aren't getting it initially. Just keep in mind that this is something that's outside of the norm. Typically, the general enrollment period would have ended in March. And typically, someone who's enrolled under an insurance plan that's not through active work would not be eligible for equitable relief, typically. But in this case, you do have until the end of September 30th, 2018 is the deadline. Anyone who would meet the criteria to qualify for this extended equitable relief could make a request through their local office. So, if you need additional information, you should go to cms.gov for more info, or you should contact your local Social Security office, or you can call them toll free at 1-800-772-1213. All right, so Medicare is not something to be, it's not intended to be confusing, but it can be. But if you did not know that failing to enroll in Medicare, if you don't have active work coverage, could result in a penalty, now you know. And if you have a penalty and did not know that there's something that could possibly get you some relief, now you know. See you next time.